So the first project we were tasked to complete as a team was this exercise we like to call Think Like a Founder. One of the goals of Draft Studio as a whole is to equip Black and Brown students with the knowledge and tools they need to not only work in the field of technology, but to be able to build their own startups and be their own founders. The goal of this exercise is to start with a problem, go through the ideation process with that problem, then to build out an MVP solving that problem. So one of the most challenging things our managers tasked to do during this internship is to come up with 20 problems to team and to ideate on them. With each of these problems, we had to find key pain points of our problems, meaning what problems come up when trying to solve our initial problem. From the information we get from those pain points, we were able to form a problem statement. From there, we start to find our target market source. So where do our users spend most of their time? Then reaching out to our target market for feedback on our problem. This process is meant to be an everlasting loop of steps. So at any moment in our ideation process, we may have had to pivot and send our problem in a different direction. Once we went through this process for all 20 problems, we had to choose one to build out and validate. Ari, the designer on our team, was able to wow us with her problem, and in doing so, we ended up going with her problem statement.
Yeah, so the problem statement we moved forward with was a language barrier gap exists between Spanish-speaking communities in various areas. For example, education, healthcare, mental health services, that stems from those services' disconnectedness from these communities and underemphasizing their needs. So why do we choose this problem? Firstly, the potential. So basically, this problem expands across various areas. It's not only Spanish-speaking communities that face language barriers, but also other immigrant communities that speak various other languages. And it's applicable to many sectors of services because language is a necessity for all. And in terms of interests, as a team, we found ourselves brainstorming solutions before we had even gotten to that step. And personal connection. So both of my parents are Mexican immigrants, and I'm a bilingual Spanish speaker myself. So growing up, I often had to go to the doctor's office with my mom to sort of be an interpreter, and my siblings and cousins had to do the same. So I've seen this issue like around me. And in terms of social impact, this issue of language barriers has existed for many years, and we wanted to choose a problem in which we could make the world more accessible to a group that's usually underrepresented. So we could do that with this problem. So a little bit of my user research. I had a conversation with Creciendo Juntos, which is a nonprofit that empowers Latinx youth and the Latinx community. And a lot of what they talked about confirmed to me that this issue expands, like I said, to multiple areas, not just education, but also mental health services, because there may be a lack of therapists in someone's native language. And then I also listened to a radio podcast that I found online. It's called Living in Philly Without English. And what they emphasize that, especially in Philly, there's a language barrier issue in the medical field. And there's a high need for medical interpreters. So interpretation is in very high demand. And thirdly, I talked with interpreters and family. And talking with interpreters, they sort of shared their experiences that was similar to mine, that some of them still have to go with their parents to the doctor's office to serve as that interpreter. And talking with my family, they told me that they felt a disconnectedness from like my education, because growing up, schools send out information to parents, but it's mostly in English, so they don't really know what's going on. So the pain points for them is disconnection from education, and then also not having access to medical interpretation because that's inaccessible. And one of our interpreters that we talked with actually said a really powerful quote. She said, "Language is the umbilical cord of culture." So language is the umbilical cord of culture. What that means is that language is tied to culture, and that those are both very important for your identity, your well-being, and even in interpretation, sometimes cultural nuances or cultural context isn't understood or translated. And that's when that like umbilical cord is severed and the problem of language barriers arises.
So the goal of doing user research is really getting an in-depth understanding of our user. The main avenue we chose in understanding our user is reaching out to our target market for interviews. We reached out to over 30 people and were able to secure 10 different interviews asking them different questions regarding our problem. With this data, we were able to come up with user personas, one for folks looking for interpretation services and another for interpreters looking for interpretation jobs. Some key characteristics of people in need of interpretation are they're most likely, I'm so sorry about that, are they're most likely to be an older age demographic that's not so tech savvy. They're also coming from unprecedented backgrounds where having an interpreter isn't even a priority or even a concern. And they just have much more things to worry about opposed to interpreting. And some of the main characteristics of interpreters we will be looking at are for students looking for interpretation like part-time jobs or professional interpreters looking to get their foot in the door or just pick up a second interpreting job. The solution to our problem, drum roll, dun, 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 is a product we like to call Interconnect. Inter stands for interpreter, and connect signifies connecting interpreters, people that need them. Our mission statement is we believe in the power of language interpretation and connection to bridge existing language barriers, and we strive to increase language accessibility by connecting interpreters to organizations and communities that need them.
So in designing Interconnect, I had two users in mind, of course, those that are in need of interpretation services and those that are interpreters. My goal was to make it simple and accessible, a design that's easy to navigate, and make connecting with others straightforward on there. So you just log in, you put in your information, and you message others and search for what you need.
So when building out the Interconnect website, we had a couple of goals in mind. We first wanted to create an MVP, a minimum viable product, to bridge interpreters to those that actually need interpretation. Another one of our goals was for this MVP to be accessible to an older demographic, because this demographic isn't that tech savvy. And our last goal was mainly to focus on targeting the specific Spanish interpretation niche. This came about with a little bit of the entire website actually being translated in Spanish for their purpose, for this purpose.
So as you can see, this is the Interconnect MVP website that we built out. The first thing that we show is kind of what Imad was talking about, how we can translate the whole website into Spanish, to cater towards Spanish speakers. And then from there, if you are an interpreter looking for a job, this is where you'll enter in all your information, your credentials, and your experience, and etc. And then from there, your whole profile will actually get posted onto our job board. So if you are in need of interpretation services, as you can see down here, this is where our profile will be posted. So this is a very challenging exercise to get us thinking like a founder and to show that it's very well possible for us to build our own startups. Some personal takeaways for me I took from this exercise, just the importance of having a deep understanding of your user, and also the importance of having a well thought out and refined problem. And just if we were to go forward with our product, we would continue to get a better understanding of our users and build out more features based on that.
Yeah, so takeaway for me is that it's actually harder to come up with problem statements than you would think. Like, it's easy to look around you and observe a problem, but you actually have to hone in on the specifics of that problem and do research and like what problems create that problem. So at the beginning, a lot of the problem statements I created had to be like completely scratched out because they were too vague. So a big part of this exercise was just choosing a problem to focus on, and that was definitely a challenge.
One takeaway of many takeaways is the importance of user data collection. And also with that user data, matching that to a specific user persona. I found this to be very critical, integral for the Thinking Like a Founder project.
The one takeaway that I took from the Think Like a Founder exercise is to find a problem that you care about, preferably one that is connected to you in some way. Therefore, it will give you more motivation when doing the ideation and validation process, and finding out a solution will come easier as well.
Yeah, and I just want to thank Lennon and all of our managers for just doing a great job of laying out exactly how we should go about doing this process. And I just really appreciate them giving us the opportunity to build out our own solution.